everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
And if you are confused as to what the shirt is, it says, "This is my hockey shirt."
Okay.
Because when I decided to start getting back into hockey last year, I did not have a jersey as I do now. So I needed to go find a shirt. And so the most efficient way was to buy a t-shirt at Ross with a circular logo, color over the circular logo with black marker, making it a hockey puck. And then write, "This is my hockey shirt." On the back, it says, "I root for the teams of my friends, bribes accepted." So,
Apparently, I didn't get in on that action
yeah, unfortunately, you're a
early enough.
little too slow. And now I root for the team that you hate. So,
Yeah. Today was the start of training camp, though. So
yeah,
hockey is coming back. However,
can't wait. Disappointment looming. It's going to be great.
Don't even get me started on disappointment, man. It's coming. We already know it's coming. However, this is not a hockey podcast. This is a movie podcast, and we've got an excellent show for you. We'll, of course, do our box office rundown, let you know what last week looked like, what you can expect coming up this weekend. We'll talk about some returns to theater of a movie and a beloved character. And we'll do another round of movie philosophizing, which we will look forward to. And of course, our watch list. All right, let's get started with the box office. And Rob, better week for the box office this week. The numbers are much better. Overall, we saw some pretty bleak numbers. Nobody went to the movie theater except Rob last weekend. But this weekend, the numbers are up. Number one, Woman King. Woman King took number one spot at 19.1 million. Barbarian at 6.5 million. And so that continues to be strong. 3.1 million in week one for Pearl and 3 million for week one. See how they run. Bullet Train in there in week 7, 2.6 million. That one's closing in on 100 million domestically. Just off the top 5, Top Gun Maverick still hanging out there with 2.2 million. What'd you make of box office this weekend?
Yeah, Top Gun Maverick just will not die.
Yeah.
Going to be in the top 10 of the box office until the heat death of the universe.
Yeah, they're not going to need to re-release it for Oscars time because it's still going to be in theaters.
Yeah. Yeah, you think they'll have to pull it at some point to make the people clamor for it when they re-release it. The Woman King, I guess, did a little bit better than I may have expected. I'm not sure what the projections or hopes were for that when it came out. So, Barbarian is doing well still. I thought it was a pretty decently made movie, so I'm not super surprised by that.
I heard it's getting a bunch more theaters this coming weekend, too.
Yeah. Usually, if a horror movie is done well, it will find an audience.
Yeah.
We've seen that many, many times.
Yeah. I'm not surprised Woman King is first. It was the only movie on this list that got any level of promotion for the last few weeks. So it was the most visible in terms of its being made known to audiences and theater audiences. The rest of the movies, for not much of a budget, I thought they all did pretty well. The top 5 is pretty solid. But I think the main takeaway is just that people were in the theaters this weekend as opposed to last weekend.
Yeah, I think the advertising I saw for Barbarian was literally just the poster in the theater. Like, I don't think I saw anything else for it before I saw it.
Other than like our own personal research on movies coming out this fall, I didn't see anything from any of these other movies.
Yeah.
They've come out in the last couple of weeks, which is really kind of crazy when you think about it. I don't know what everyone's doing, but hey, they're doing what they're doing. Anything else in this past week?
Not really. Not a whole lot going on right now.
Yeah. Yep, it is true. Um, so that brings us to what we got coming out this weekend. There's two main releases this weekend. Number one is Don't Worry, Darling. And this stars Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, Chris Pine, Olivia Wilde. And this is a 1950s housewife living with her husband in a utopian experimental community begins to worry that his glamorous company may be hiding disturbing secrets.
Yeah, and I said with this one in our fall movie preview that
Mhm.
I think this is the one I'm most looking forward to
Hmm.
for the fall movie season. So definitely excited about this one coming out.
All right. And so you have the Railway Children or the Railway Children Return, whichever you feel like calling it. That's the original title. It's just being called Railway Children now. And this stars John Bradley, Jenny Adcutter, Sheridan Smith, Tom Courtney. And this follows a group of children who are evacuated to a Yorkshire village during the Second World War, where they encounter a young soldier who, like them, is far from home.
Hmm.
So you have the Railway Children. There was a 1970 movie called The Railway Children, which I think is broadly along the same lines, if I'm not mistaken. But um, so that's the main thing coming out. So talk to us a little bit about why you're excited about Don't Worry, Darling.
So I do. I think my favorite genre of movie is probably like suspense, thriller, suspense, like psychological suspense thriller, and that's what this movie looks like. Like there's something going on, but there's something very wrong happening underneath the surface of
Mhm.
everything. You have to try and figure out what that is, and it seems like this whole movie, is based on that conceit. So it's just a style of movie making that I really like
Okay.
quite a bit. And I also am excited about this one because the actors in it, I think, are really quality actors who I think can pull it off. The one question mark, I guess, is Harry Styles. He hasn't done a whole lot as an actor so far.
Yeah.
Um, he was he did play a pretty decent small role in Dunkirk, but beyond that, he hasn't had too much to do. So the
Yeah.
question is still out there if he can carry a lead type role in a movie. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and that movie is directed by Olivia Wilde as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am slightly there's almost a there's two conflicting cliches about the 1950s. This like idyllic time period cliche, and this everything was actually really terrible in the 50s cliche. And there's kind of like warring cliches about this. So I'm concerned about the setting of this movie being the 1950s, that it's going to fall into one of the cliches on that front. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it's the most obvious choice of the two coming out. I don't really have an interest in the Railway Children personally, but hey, could be good. Who knows?
I wonder if the Railway Children will feature an anthropomorphic theological lion. Oh wait, that might be a different movie about kids being evacuated from London during World War II.
Yeah, yeah, just a little bit different. Okay, so that's the box office this weekend. Plenty of interesting movies to see. Lots of different genres, lots of different things out there. So, if you do head to a theater, you have plenty of choices, and there's probably something in there you're gonna like. All right, so let's move on to two stories that also feature box office. Number one is the return of Avatar. Avatar, the original movie from 2009, is coming back into theaters. Um, and it is, of course, doing that as a lead up to the next feature film, which comes out in December. And so this one is coming out September 23rd. So uh, in IMAX, if you can find it near you. Uh, Avatar is back out. Coincidentally, or not coincidentally, actually, it has disappeared from Disney Plus. as a result. They've taken it out of Disney Plus so that to try and force you to go see it in theaters. Um, Try and make their money back however they're going to do it. It's not like they never made any money. Um, so what do you make of the re-release of Avatar, and are you interested?
Well, it'll absolutely make some amount of millions of dollars. So, just because people love Avatar,
Yeah.
and I'm sure I'm sure there are a decent amount of people who didn't see it in IMAX when
Hmm.
it came out that will want to go see it in IMAX. Um, I don't know if I'm super crazy clamoring to go see it
Hmm.
in the theater. But then again, I might. I don't know. I I think there are people who will be very excited about it. I'm not one of those people,
Yeah.
but I think there will be enough people who are excited about it to make it a decent amount of money.
I've been on the record for a while of saying that this was a rather um, overrated movie, and its impact was largely nominal and has just disappeared into the film landscape. So the idea that it's coming back, I'm fairly ambivalent to the next two Avatar movies coming out, so I'm equally as ambivalent about the idea of going to see it in theaters. And since I haven't been to the theaters in a little bit, and there's a bunch of stuff that I could be interested in checking out, the likelihood is I won't be at Avatar. But hey, if you never got to see it in IMAX, if you're interested, or if you just forget what this movie was all about, because frankly, most people probably did, then it's your opportunity. And now there's a second story out there, which I will let Rob take the lead on because Rob is very, very excited about this story. And it involves a good old Keanu Reeves.
So there is major movement in there being a sequel to the movie Constantine, which starred Keanu Reeves um, as John Constantine, the Marvel. I don't know if you want to call him a hero or an anti-hero, um, who ends up vanquishing demons to the underworld and fighting them as they try to break into the real world, and also hangs out and fights with Satan and a whole bunch of stuff in the original one. If you have not seen Constantine, I would highly recommend watching it. I think it's quite an interesting thing because I think that it's one of the best like graphic novel comic book movies that have been done. But it kind of came before the wave of the movies, and so it wasn't really quite riding that popularity of some of the later comic book slash graphic novel movies that came out.
Yeah.
And so I think it got overlooked a little bit or not recognized. Um, I think that it is a very well done movie. I just think it's a quality movie, and that a lot of movies of that genre don't match up to the standard that it set. But I also think a lot of people haven't seen it because it just was not a huge area of filmmaking or audience engagement the time it came out. And I will also say that I think Peter Stormare's portrayal of Lucifer might be the best portrayal of the devil
Hmm.
in any movie ever.
Better than Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate.
Even better than Will Smith in Winter's Tale or whatever that movie was called.
Hmm.
Yes, Will Smith played the devil in the movie. Look it up. But yeah, his character, they have him dressed in white. He's very much playing the angel of light version of Lucifer that's trying to deceive and get his way, and just dripping in sardonic conversation. His character is fantastic, and the way they filmed it is also fantastic. So I've long wanted a sequel to this movie. So I think that you're in for a treat if you get a chance to see this when it eventually comes out. And I guess the only question mark is Keanu Reeves. Can he pull off that character with the kind of vigor and action that they did in the original one?
Yeah. with his portrayal of John Wick, I think Keanu has shown that he's still got what it takes. So I'm confident that he will do well on this. I'll be honest, I've seen Constantine. I saw it shortly after it came out, and I that's the last time I've seen it. I haven't
Hmm.
years and years and years. So I remember mostly the look and the feel of the movie. That was mostly what my impressions were of it. It does have a much darker subject matter than most of your other comic book
Hmm.
graphic novel type things would. So that does slightly restrict its audience just by the nature of it. But there is a market for it, obviously, and especially now when the genre is much more developed. So I think this would be a huge hit if it came out.
I heard when Reached for Comment, Keanu Reeves said that people were asking if Constantine was back, and he said, "Yeah, he's thinking Constantine is back."
Keanu's the best. The best. He's awesome. He's great. We do not deserve Keanu Reeves. Good stuff. Um, yeah. So that's just a couple of additions that you can be looking forward to coming out. So now we'll move on to our discussion. And tonight we're going to do another round of movie philosophizing. This is where we take a specific scene or a movie in general, and we analyze the philosophical underpinnings of it. What is the underlying philosophy? What does it have to say? And uh, we talk about that a little bit. So each one of us is going to do a specific movie. Rob, would you like to go first?
So mine's a little bit different in that it's not, I would say it's not super deep philosophically, but I think it is a question that I wonder about other people, having
Hmm.
wondered it about myself and thought through it myself. And the main question, and I will use a couple examples, is when have you seen yourself in a movie?
Hmm. This is
Um,
interesting.
when have you been watching a movie, seen in a character, how they act, how they speak, the decisions that they make, and thought, that's me? Because
Hmm.
I feel like for everyone there has to be some instance where that's happened to
Yeah.
them. So I will say that this was brought on by I watched a movie with my best friend this last week that I had never seen. That is kind of a classic movie. I've been told many times I should watch. It won an Oscar for a very famous actor who
Hmm.
we have a lot of respect for. We talked about on the podcast many times before. That actor being named one Thomas Hanks.
Ah, yes, yes.
And the movie is Philadelphia from 1993 with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington,
Okay.
which I had not seen before this weekend.
Hmm.
Um, Now, when I say that I saw myself in Tom Hanks' character, the main scene that this happened with, there's a scene where they are going over questions that Tom Hanks' character is going to be asked in the courtroom. And he starts playing some music in the background. And he asks the lawyer, played by Denzel Washington, whose character's name is Joe, and Tom Hanks's character's name is Andrew. He asks him if he likes opera music, and you could see in Joe's face in that moment that he's like, not really. But then as the music goes on, Andrew starts explaining what's happening in the music.
Hmm.
And he says, the mother died, saving her. Look, the place that cradled me is burning. Do you hear the heartache in her voice? Can you feel it, Joe? Now in come the strings and it changes everything. The music, it fills with a hope and it'll change again. Listen, listen. I bring sorrow to those who love me. Oh, that single cello. It was during this sorrow that love came to me, a voice filled with harmony that said, live still, I am life. Heaven is in your eyes. Is everything around you just the blood and the mud? I am divine. I'm oblivion. I am the God that comes down from the heavens to the earth and makes of the earth a heaven. I am love. I am love. I am love. And as I was watching that scene, I thought, he's describing music the way I describe music.
Hmm. Hmm.
That it's not just, oh, listen to this cool part here. Like listen to what the music is saying, like by itself, just the music. Listen to what, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like so many different genres of music. And in fact, recently I was made fun of for after having watched another movie this week that I watched for the very first time, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh,
Finally,
okay. All right.
while watching it, I said that the scene while they were doing the Night at the Opera,
Hmm.
that had jumped into my top five opera scenes of all time in movies. And then I was questioned as to why exactly would I have five favorite opera scenes in movies.
There's actually a significant amount of
Yeah,
opera in
yeah,
movies because it's very
yeah.
cinematic.
And it's just because I love music and I love the story that it tells. So that specific scene is one where I've seen myself. And
Hmm.
if I may like broaden the scope just a little bit,
Got it.
the movie that I've seen myself most in is High Fidelity with John Cusack,
Oh, yes, I've seen this.
where the owner of the record store, which I collect records, is literally named Rob. And the movie is about him recounting the stories of his terrible breakups,
Mm,
which I have had a few of. And there's so much in Rob's character that my wife has told me,
hmm.
like, you're him.
Yeah.
Just in how he talks about music, how he loves music, how he makes mixtapes for things, how he basically sets his life to the soundtrack of music. And there are so many quotes in that movie that I love. And my favorite is which came first, the music or the misery?
Mm.
Um, did I listen to pop music because I felt bad, or did I feel bad because I listened to pop music?
Hmm.
And I love that whole movie and just the idea that he has kind of based his life around music. So in a lot of ways, like I tell people often, music is who I am. And if you know me at all, and Ryan would be one of those people, you would understand like what that means.
Yep.
It's not just like a simple like, oh, I like music.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot deeper
Yeah, for
than
sure.
that. So having said all that and talked for a billion years, um, I guess my question is, where have you seen yourself
I
in
was
that you've watched?
I was thinking about that, and I could probably come up with better answers if I had a little bit more time to think
Mm-hmm.
about it. Off the top of my head, kind of two movies came to immediately to mind. There was a 1990s like chick flick called Boys and Girls. I think it was like Freddie Prinze Jr. and like Claire Forlani. And it's the one where like he just gets put in the friend zone super hard. And like it just goes back and forth on this is, um and it's just like that relationship just lined up with something that was happening in my life like
Mm.
at that exact moment that I saw that movie for the first time, and it was just like, oh my goodness, this is it. Like this is exactly what's going on. And it's one of those like cathartic moments where you're just like, yeah, okay, I get it now. Now the music in that movie is terrible. It's like weirdo 90s like elevator jazz pop. It's really terrible. But for whatever reason, it just lined up with that. And the other one I
Mm.
would say is Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Mm.
Um, having those moments where you realize that, you know what, my life is not what I would always want it to be. Like, have I just been sitting back and letting things happen instead of, going out and trying to create for myself? Like there's a lot to that movie. And and that feeling and that call for adventure, I think, is something
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, and I've this has happened to me multiple times when I've seen this movie, and I know this movie by heart by this point. So those are the two things that I could think,
Mm.
that I felt off the top of my head that I resonated with the most.
Yeah, that's a great movie. If you haven't seen that, it's definitely film for fans. Endorse.
Absolutely.
Ready. Secret Life of Walter Mitty, definitely worth the watch.
Yeah, so good and so well made too.
Yeah,
Really well
yeah.
made.
I was very pleasantly surprised by that movie when
Yeah.
I saw it the first time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, Before we go on to mine, I just have a question. Um, Give me some more of your favorite operatic appearances in movies. I need to hear at least one or two more of these.
Yeah, so this kind of just thought came about because I'd seen that scene in Philadelphia, and then I was thinking further, and obviously the Bohemian Rhapsody one,
Mhm.
a few others, a Mission Impossible Rogue Nation.
Yeah, that's one that
There,
immediately came to my
there's a
mind.
10-minute scene that is literally set to the Nessun Dorma aria from the opera Turandot, and that is my favorite opera song of all time. Period.
Mm.
And so to see that with that happening in the like this espionage kind of sniper scene going on in the background the whole time and have it like in real time with the music was pretty cool. Um, the other one that is will be obvious to you as well is the Boondock Saints.
Hmm.
There was a
Oh
firefight.
man, yeah, yeah.
Oh man, it's just
Oh yeah,
so good with the music in the
yeah,
background and bullets flying around and Willem
mhm,
Dafoe there but not there, and
yeah.
um, that is just absolutely fantastic. And then uh, also the Shawshank Redemption
Ah,
has the playing of an opera record featured
mhm,
prominently throughout
yeah.
the movie in a couple scenes. So those are the ones that were on my list.
I would add two things. One, it's not a very long scene. The scene in Batman Begins um, that takes place in an opera just before the death of
Mm.
Bruce's parents, where they really lay on the bat motifs, and the opera is used very, very effectively because it has that cinematic element to it.
Hmm.
And this was not from movies at all, but opera was always used for the character Lionel Luthor in the CW show um, Smallville.
Hmm.
That character, and it worked out because he was such a Machiavellian evil character that there was all these like really fantastic scenes where it's just showing Lionel Luthor doing something with opera in the background. It was yeah, it was definitely a thing throughout the series. They did well. Excellent. Okay. So for my movie, I'm picking a specific scene from Jurassic World Dominion. And there's two elements of a speech. I want to say it's maybe a half hour in to the movie or something where Malcolm, the character of Malcolm, is speaking at the Biosyn to the Biosyn employees or whatnot. And he gives this monologue, and um, Malcolm has throughout the series, especially in the first one, has always been this kind of like weird, dark conscience of the movies. He's like the prophet, as it were, of the movies. But he says two specific things here, and I think they are slightly contradictory. But also indicative of why I like the original Jurassic Park so much and why I didn't love the Jurassic World series nearly as much. So the first line he says, close to the beginning of his speech, um, if you haven't seen the Jurassic World Dominion or the Jurassic World movies, basically, haha, dinosaurs get loose and they're out in the real world. Um, and he makes the statement that no one creature has any more right to live than another. And this is one of those where this is a theme that's been running through the Jurassic World movies. It showed up, and I complained about it uh, at the in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, where basically the choice in that movie was let the dinosaurs in the basement die or release them out into the wild, into the public. And they chose to release them out into the public, resulting in who knows how many deaths. And so I think there's this idea that human beings and animals are of the same intrinsic value, runs through these movies. And I have an issue with that because they are not. Human beings are of more worth than animals. I know that might be controversial, but it's true. We are. And so when it comes to a choice on some of these lines, you have to favor humans. And there's an anti-human element to some of this, which I think is kind of an undercurrent running through the Jurassic World movies at times, and it makes the movies muddled a little bit. And I think there is a strain of anti-humanism that runs through some of the more radical elements of um, like the environmentalists or whatever. And I read this. I don't know how long ago I read this, but read that radical environmentalists make the best bad guys, and it rattled off all the movies that off the top of their heads. It was like that's who it was. And I mean, of course, um, the dude from Aquaman was there, but the number one was of course Thanos. Thanos, to save the universe, I have to kill half the living beings in the universe. And so there's a real anti-human strain that runs through some of these, and it's used when it's used effectively, which it often can be. You end up with a character like Thanos, who is an incredible bad guy, um, but who's relatable. And it's kind of like a Malthusian type of um, philosophy, you know. Um, and there's a real anti-human strain through that. And so this line from Malcolm's speech basically is saying, the dinosaurs are out there, but they, who cares how many they kill? There's nothing we can do about it. On one hand, then he follows with the later part of his speech where he basically goes into a similar rant to what he talked about in Jurassic Park, where he's basically talking about the hubris of the scientists. And his whole point is the law of unintended consequences. When you mess with something, there is unintended consequences that result. As soon as you think you can control something, as soon as you think that you are smart enough to understand a vast system and that you can make changes to it, inevitably something behaves in a way that you were not prepared for, in a way that you were not anticipating. And as a result of that, a substantial amount of unintended consequences come as a result. And one of the things that this is it's a warning about hubris, and especially among intellectuals, because this is kind of like Malcolm's character is always kind of the outsider intellectual, and he's always kind of warning about the dangers and the hubris of the scientists throughout these series. And I think the one thing that you got to be aware of is that whenever you think you can control something, you can't. especially at a high level. You just can't. You can't control something. So they're constantly messing around with the ecosystem. They're messing around with DNA. They're messing around with gene splicing and all those type of things. And the whole process is, we know how we can control this. We know how it's going to operate. And that level of hubris always leads to a ridiculous amount of consequences. The law of unintended consequences is real. The likelihood, and this is part of it, almost every single change you can make to a system is going to be bad. The likelihood that you are the one who stumbled upon the right change is going to make it work is highly unlikely. So the best you can hope for is not to screw it up. Hmm. And the idea that you understand something completely in order to be able to know what changes need to be made to it, something that has survived and has existed for a long period of time, is really, really, really unlikely. And that's one of the learning curves. And this is one of the things that made Jurassic Park the the moral clarity of Jurassic Park so much is because this is precisely what happens. This is what Malcolm warns, and then you see the consequences of it as a result. And there's a great scene in the original Jurassic Park where the one character is sitting there talking with the inventor, and he basically is like, this time we were going to make it work. This time it was control. And she responds to him, this is still the flea circus, and this is still an illusion. And I think that's something we have to so often be aware of, is that our tweaks to the system are much more likely to do damage than they are to create actual good consequences. But we don't seem to see that.
Yeah, I think that these two ideas kind of, I understand your criticism of the idea of there being parity between humanity and nature, if you want to put it that way. But in these movies, and I was also thinking about the throughout all of them, but most explicitly through the most recent iteration of the Godzilla movies. There's been this undercurrent of basically the reason why we're saying that the animals have the right to be alive and surviving as much as humanity is because we have brought them into existence. We have done something in either trying to create or destroy them that has turned them into something beyond what they ever should have been. And so, therefore, the fact that they are surviving is a punishment upon us. I think that's something that Malcolm's character is very strident on, very vocal about. And I think that you also saw that in Godzilla with Ken Watanabe's character. I can't remember his name now. The scientist, was basically said the same thing. Like we put nuclear bombs into the ocean here to try and just test things. We ended up creating this monster, this Godzilla, and then all these other monsters. And so now it's our responsibility to deal with the consequences of that. And I think I definitely agree with you on the idea that at its base, the idea of humanity having parity with nature is not a worldview we should endorse. But I also think there's that side area, if you want to call it, of their momentum and preservation being almost like a punishment as a result of humanity going too far.
Yeah, and there is certainly a punishment element, and it's partly that Malcolm's speech for me is colored by what they did at the end of Fallen Kingdom, so it doesn't exist entirely in a vacuum. Whereas Malcolm's motivation for saying it might be slightly different than the general underpinning that's coming in through the movies, if that makes sense. And I think what that does is, I think it muddles, for lack of a better term, it muddles the morality of the Jurassic World movies. Because there is a sense of moral clarity to the original Jurassic Park, in particular, as to what is good and what is bad. Now, there's nuance to it, obviously. The characters who created this are both good and bad, and they have good elements and bad elements. But there is a sense of moral clarity to the movie, and I think the later ones lack that to some extent. Yeah. But I have slightly more to say about the movie and how it fits in our watch list. But yeah, so that's the two big thing, that philosophical idea of humans basically being just another animal, and the law of unintended consequences. All right, let's move on to our watch list. Rob, what'd you watch this week?
So I did already say that I had watched Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes.
which I finally watched for the first time after being told many, many, many times that I should watch it.
Yeah.
Um, and I have to agree that it's one of the better music biopics I have seen. Um, I do think that Rami Malek did a fantastic job as Freddie Prince. Oh my, did a fantastic job as Freddie Mercury. Um, I did not know all of the backstory about Freddie Mercury, is like his upbringing and all of that
Mhm.
stuff. So that was neat to see that, and how he kind of just was like uh, uh, a good, not victim of circumstance, but like he was able to take advantage of the circumstances and become a part of a band, and then it just kind of was meteoric from
Mhm.
there for them, and to see how far he sunk then, and to have to come back and get things together. That performance at Live Aid is just uh, classic, and I've been told that I need to watch the side by side video of the movie and the performance itself, because apparently they're very close to each other as far as how they recorded it. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Yeah.
Um, I also watched Philadelphia, as I said, with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, and I will say that my opinion, Tom Hanks' Oscar win for that performance is well deserved. I think he did just a fantastic job as a character who is fired because basically fired because he contracted the AIDS virus by the law firm he works for, and um, has to go to court to try and prove that. I also watched Ambulance.
Ah,
Came
yes.
out last year, Michael Bay,
Hmm.
and I have no idea what to make of the fact that Michael Bay referenced not one but two of his own movies in his movie.
I was going to say on the level of how Michael Bay is this movie.
That's about how Michael Bay it is.
And if you're saying he referenced two of his own movies, then we are at very peak
Yeah,
Michael Bay.
his one character quotes The Rock, and then says, from that movie The Rock, and the other character says, "Yeah, The Rock, he's a great actor." Um, and but he used to be a wrestler. That's a direct quote from the movie. And then as they're getting out of the car, he says, "Let's bad boys this one." And then it actually cut to the side, like looking up angle of the one guy getting out of the police car,
Oh
just
man.
like from Bad Boys.
Wow.
Uh, and there's certainly some explosions in the movie. Not crazy Michael Bay explosions, but there are some explosions. Um, Jake Gyllenhaal actually does a really good job in the movie. I think that it was above average as far as movies go. Um, I would say definitely above average as far as Michael Bay movies go.
Okay.
But I also think that a lot of people were probably Michael Bay'd out
Yeah.
and just had no desire at all to even give this movie a chance. Um, but it was enjoyable. It reminded me of a Michael Bay movie, like a '90s movie where you just don't have to really think too much, and you just follow the story and accept everything that happens, because why wouldn't it happen that way? So those are three things that I watched this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Um, like I said, I watched Jurassic World Dominion, and so I wanted to take just a moment, like, to talk. We talked about the philosophy behind it, but as for the movie itself, I mean, it did include all of the characters. Um, there were some good aspects to that, some not good aspects to it. It's difficult to manage that large of a cast, and Marvel movies are famous for how good they handle that. Um, this one did okay. It did okay on handling it. I think there was probably just too much going on. There was too much going on. But what I think the conclusion I came to with Jurassic World Dominion is um, I hope this is the end for the Jurassic. movies. Um, I think what you ended up with, and there's some spoilery stuff in here, but as this series has drug on, in particular, you saw this in the Jurassic World movies, is it was no longer enough to see dinosaurs on screen. They had to just continue like, oh, no, this is a bigger dinosaur. This is a crazier dinosaur. And to the point where basically almost everything in Dominion is like a crazy, weird hybrid. So it's like, it's not like dinosaurs are no longer enough. And that's part of the attrition that comes from like, okay, we thrilled the audiences with dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. 30 years later, you know, nobody's impressed. And so it just like it got further and further away from like the original premise and to the point where like everything is like a weird hybrid, like bug dinosaur created, like chicken dinosaur, all this type of stuff. So yeah.
I will say I'm glad they didn't go completely off the rails because one of the original adaptations of this series had it ending with dinosaur human hybrids with rocket packs. And no, I'm not making that up. You can look it up.
Yeah. I think the one positive I would say is I think they did a good job at least trying to think through if dinosaurs were released into the everyday public, how would the public react to that? And like what would be some of the consequences? I think they did a half decent job of trying to portray what that some of that would look like. So I'll give it that. So okay movie. Not spectacular, but okay.
I was a little disappointed, spoiler alert, that the scene from the trailer with the dinosaur in the ocean where it like attacked the crab boat or lobster boat or whatever
Mm.
was like the very first scene in the movie
Mm.
because that was like a really cool scene. So I
Yeah.
was expecting it to be like somewhere like in the middle of the movie or the end, like some climactic type scene, but it was literally the first thing that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see, but hopefully they'll give it a pause. I think it needs a break at this point. I think we've seen enough dinosaurs on screen. And it's like at some point like you can't you can't keep making the same mistakes six different times. Like
So if you've gone from Jurassic Park to Jurassic World, is Jurassic Universe next?
yeah,
Dinosaurs in space.
dinosaurs in space. I think
But
we're approaching Sharknado territory there,
yeah,
but who knows? All right, you got anything else, Rob?
I do not.
All right, then that is the show. Thank you for checking out Film for Fans. Make sure you visit filmforfans.com for all of our awesome written content and recommendations. And tell your friends about the podcast and YouTube channel. And of course, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Until next time, enjoy the movies.